Thanks, Hein, and thanks to everyone for the invitation to speak to you on this auspicious occasion. I was contemplating the program this morning and trying to work out how long I actually had to talk, and noted that my start time was 10:15, finishing at 11, which was somewhere in the region of 45 minutes, which conflicted with Ian's instruction to speak for about 25 minutes, a minute a year, which seemed a good deal. I think we're now at a different time point, so you may have to put up with me musing here endlessly, and feel free to throw branches of the tree at me. A good time to plant a tree was 25 years ago, rather than the 20, and the tree certainly has flourished. The analogy is not one that I'd actually dreamt up to talk about, but it's a powerful image, and I thank you for that. 25 years on sort of put me vaguely in mind of the Harris School song, which was 40 years on, those of you know it. I won't sing because my singing voice is well past its prime. In fact, I was 12 and I was told to stop singing. But I just need to work out how to work this machine now. Which button do I push? There we go. In starting the reminiscence and the musings, I just feel we need to start with some acknowledgements. In part, that's already been done, but there are folk that do need to be remembered. Those who were named in terms of the first interim executive, the first elected executive, but also all those many people, not just the presidents who put so much time into the organisation, but all the members of the national executive, the members on the branch committees, who put endless time into ensuring that the tree planted 25 years ago was well watered, grew and reached the incredible height it now has. But there's one group that tend not to be acknowledged, and I feel we need to think about that, and those are, in fact, the family members of the folk who do commit themselves to coming to Wellington and spending their time looking after our organisation. The spouses tend to be neglected, the families tend to be forgotten if we're not careful, because the hours that can be put into nurturing our tree can be all-consuming. And I say this with some personal reflection as well. I have a wife who does remind me of that fact. I have a son who, in his early age, said, when I grow up, I want a job that doesn't have any meetings in it. And my surprise was to find I had a son. But I think we do owe a debt of gratitude to the invisible support that is given to those of us who endlessly spend time looking after our collective futures. The 25 years drift through, I hope doesn't get too boring for you. Part of it's just going to be a quick history lesson. I don't want to dwell too long on the history. It's been touched on somewhat, but it can be forgotten, certainly by those of a younger nature, although when I look around, the grey hairs seem to compete well with the non-grey hairs, and that's good. The New Zealand Medical Association was, for many, many years, the organ by which we negotiated, the body responsible for our rations. And the committee within the NZMA, the Central Specialist Committee, was that group. The Central Specialist Committee was charged with a range of activities, not only industrial, but certainly looking after the professional interests of specialists of all ilk, part-time employees, private as well as whole-timers, and was comprised of membership from a number of alphabet soups, and I'll see if I can get them all right. The Whole-Time Senior Medical Officers Association, the New Zealand Association of Part-Time Hospital Specialists, I believe that's the correct name, the Medical Superintendents Association of New Zealand, and I might not have that quite right, Roger might be able to correct me on that, and the RMOA, although RMO has only joined the Central Specialist Committee towards the end of its career. But that was a really democratically elected group representing the spectrum of interests within the specialist workforce. There was a beast called HOMAC. How you pronounce that as HOMAC is beyond me, but that's how it is pronounced. The Health Medical Officers Advisory Committee, which actually was the body where we negotiated. HOMAC was comprised of two elements, a staff side and an official side. The staff side was drawn from the Central Specialist Committee, and they're all ministerial appointments. So I still hold my warrant. Actually, they never cancelled it, but HOMAC has disappeared. and the official side, which had members from the Ministry, from the State Service Commission, and other representatives of the employers. And we got together, and there's an independent chair as well, often a lawyer, and our role was to discuss the terms and conditions of senior medical officers and agree on a submission to the HSC, the Higher Salaries Commission, which would then rule and deliver a determination, which was contained in something called the M10. Why it was 10 and why it was M is beyond me, but the M10 was well known. The difficulty with HOMAC was that we never ever, to my knowledge, reached agreement between the staff and the official side. There was a bit of a standoff, and we always made independent submissions to the High Salary Commission, who then basically were the arbitrator, and came down with a ruling which probably reflected the interests of neither side. Having said that, the progress made through this mechanism was real, and our salaries didn't stay still, and our conditions and terms didn't stay still, and we made reasonable advances, but frustrating. Frustrating would be very, very illustrative. Frustrating to the point that we began to recognize that we were a bunch of amateurs playing in a really difficult pool, with the officials being well supported and skilled, if you like, in saying no. We were keen, and enthusiasm didn't quite make up for that lack of knowledge. So we formed something called the CNS, the Central, Jim, help me out, Central Negotiating Service, was it not? Yeah. Which was supported financially and in membership from the organisations, the RMOs, the whole-timers, the part-timers, as well as the NZMA, and we engaged someone called Rod Trott from Trott Associates, I believe, to act as our advisor in all things industrial. And that was a bold step forward for the enthusiastic professional amateurs in terms of negotiating power. And we utilised that skill to take into HOMAC. It didn't actually, in the time that HOMAC existed, make much difference, but it was a bold and significant step forward in our thinking. Then along came the Area Health Board Amendment Act 1988, which changed the game entirely, and we found that the whole HOMAC, High Salaries Commission playing field was removed, and we were brought in under the Labour Relations Act, and the net result of which was that the NZMA could no longer be our union. It was unable to be both a professional body as well as a union according to all the rules, and hence we gave birth to the Association of Salaried Medical Specialists. The birth thing was interesting. I don't think there was a particularly skilled obstetrician present, but we struggled on, and possibly the placenta was planted under the tree. There were a number of key players in the process of developing a union, because that was, for a start, quite a novel concept for us as professionals at that time. You've all grown up in it now, and it seems normal, but then it was, to talk about being a union was something quite different. The Central Specialist Committee at the time of the transition was basically the body that did most of the work, supported by elements of the NZMA, and I mentioned Jill Thompson. I don't know where Jill is now, but she was the executive officer involved, and she did a power of work for us. We had to develop union rules, which were somewhat challenging in of themselves, and enroll a membership, which was our biggest conceptual challenge. Having said all of that, we succeeded, and we launched the union, the ASMS as such, on the 1st of April 1989. There was a gap during which the NZMA was deemed to be the union by some sleight of legislative hand, and I don't know, Shirley Homewood, she wrote a briefing paper, which was very interesting when I read it now, talking about how the NZMA was able to act as a union in the interim. Having said that, we launched on the 1st of April. The union rules, as I say, had been developed. We basically stole someone else's and modified them to suit our purposes, trying to inject the necessary professional subtext into what was a negotiating body. It's visible. You notice that's actually dated June 1989, not April. That's because we only printed them at that point in time and decided, and rereading the minutes, it's actually fascinating to go back over all the documentation. We discussed at some length whether we should print them, should we distribute them, and how we might do that. But those be the union rules as they were in 1989, and anyone wants to have a read, I've got them. I suspect you'd be foolish if you did. The next part of being a union is you had to have someone to replace Rod Trott who would provide us with our industrial might and someone to run the office, and that someone has already been mentioned. And we went through a process of recruitment, and this is where Ian's allowed to say bugger, I think, because I did inquire as to whether his second name was known to the world, and he's forgiven me in advance. This is the contract, a rather sad-looking thing, which, if I went on through a number of pages, you'll find Ian's signature and my signature confirming his employment as our executive director. The process of appointing him has some interest, and some of you would have heard this particular story before, and I don't apologise for repeating it. But there were three of us charged with, on the appointments committee, Alan Fraser, Jim Judson, and myself. And we went through a proper process. We had someone who was skilled in employment. They advertised, they shortlisted, and we interviewed. And we came down to two folk. And the story goes that we were a bit hung up. We couldn't quite decide which way to go. And the following morning from our meeting, Jim came along and said he'd had a dream. And hence Ian, and 25 years on, we still have Ian, the one consistent, as we've said, feature, and probably, without making him get too top-heavy, a key factor in our success through the many, many years. So thank you, Ian, for everything you've done. The next was the membership, and as I say, a bit of trepidation, but what we did, we sent everyone a grey envelope. There's writing on the outside indicating to whom it was sent. Inside were the bits of paper, which, again, someone can read if they wish, selling the concept of unionism to a bunch of state professionals, and with an invitation to apply for membership. We had to reach 1,000 in order to be a registrable union, and we sort of hung back, hoping like hell we would get there. Otherwise, we could have been taken over by another union, naming us in their membership clause. We made 1,260 by the August of 1989 as a paper to the National Executive from Ian, which was 60% penetration, which at that time had us pretty happy. We'd hit the numbers. We weren't being rejected, and at 60% after 4 odd months struck us as not bad going. The fact that we're now over 4,000 with 90% penetration, then again, is I think a statement of just the value of the ASMS in the minds of the membership. I could stop there and say, well, 25 years must have done good, because we wouldn't be in that state of play if it hadn't, but I think I'm stuck talking to you for a bit longer. There is a risk of, when we talk, is only remembering and thinking about those employees of the DHBs, at the vast majority, but it was interesting to just find out just how many other employee groups are actually covered by the ASMS, and the list isn't there to read, the list is just there to show it's long, and absorbs obviously a lot of time of central office in meeting the needs of those particular subsets of employees. Most of my talk, in fact probably all of it, is going to be DHB and its predecessors orientated, but that's not to forget all those others who are part of the ASMS. National elections took place. We spoke about the interim executive, and they've been introduced, so I won't go through that process again. But it was a commitment that we would have national elections completed by the 25th of August, and by 25th of August it was over. And again, Shirley Homewood, who I just mentioned, was the returning officer, and declared elected that likely looking bunch, which you'll see photographs around the place, all of whom except 4 are here, and Mark Fraundhofer and Trevor Fitzjohn in the back right are, I think, absent, and sadly Don Palmer, front left to you, and John Hawke, front right to you, are both deceased and missed by those of us who worked with them for so many years. They were good people, and it's with sorrow that I reflect. The guy in the middle is actually me with a beard. I shaved it off, and my family stopped recognising me, but I don't think they knew who I was anyway, so it didn't really matter. They said I looked younger without it, but not so wise. It's debatable. Anyway, the next was our first award. We weren't a union for long when we had to settle an award round, and October 1989 is actually incorrect. It was August that we settled that award, so we came into being on April and we settled in August. And it was a bit of a first, and I think probably a last as well in terms of industrial activity in New Zealand, that we went to final offer arbitration. And final offer arbitration is interesting. It's not quite like the HSC where you make your separate submissions from the staff and the official side, and they will rule up the middle. Final offer is we say what we want, they say what they want, and it's one or the other. So there's a bit of gamemanship, and it's a matter of who blinks first and last as to what you include and don't include in your attempt to be accepted. I think we lost. In fact, I know we lost, and the salary increase which came out of that round was $6 a week, which wasn't exactly phenomenal. The dentists at about that time were part of our membership, and we negotiated for the dentists for the first time shortly after that, and that went to final offer arbitration. And the dentists probably wondered what they had joined because they also got $6 a week. But anyway, that's the award booklet. You'll notice it's dated October because that's when it was printed, but the round, as I say, was completed in August. And I think I'm correct that no one else has gone final offer since then. Ian, is that right?
Just the police.
Just the police. Okay, I suppose that's fair enough, yeah. So that was the start of many, many rounds of negotiations which have continued through to this day. I was involved in the early days, and we used to sit for endless hours in little rooms waiting to come out and say something for about 5 minutes before we retreated again. I often reflected that we were advantaged in one way, in that we were friends. We all knew each other. We could sit and chat and be relaxed in each other's company. Whereas often I call it the official side again, they were people brought together, and I'm not too sure that they had the same level of camaraderie as we did. And I particularly remember one negotiation which finished in Christchurch, in a building that no longer exists. That was about 2 a.m. before we finally concluded, and I think it was a matter of who could stay awake the longest. We actually did quite well out of that round, and it really was an attrition. But we didn't quite get down to playing poker, but we had long nights. And enjoyable when I look back, but again, not particularly good for families. And then we came to the first annual conference, which was in 3rd of November 1989. And I sat down and I was counting on my fingers just before coming up and saying, well, the next conference is going to be the 25th, but I'm wrong. The last conference was the 25th. The next one in November will be the 26th, which is a lot of conferences. I had a bit of a read of my presidential address, which I made at that first conference, and many of the elements of it are true today, and I sort of reflected on what you were saying, Hein, in a strange way. I'd actually thought initially I'll just read it again and who would know the difference, but I'd have to find the dates and change them the whole way through, which might trip me up. But again, it was talking a little about the political environment, the health environment, the importance of the public health system, the importance of the ASMS in being a democratic, although centrally governed but peripherally controlled and driven organisation, the importance of the branches, which with some regret to me did dissipate, and I'm thrilled to see that they have now been reinvigorated, because that's where the people are, that's where the message should come from. And the other thing I reflected on, which was really from my NZMA days, which is probably not true, is the tendency for the people who have not become engaged and involved to sometimes sit and criticise the decisions they do not like, and take those which they do. But I don't think it's quite as true as it was then. But you'd find, I did not like that particular phrase in that settlement, therefore I'm going to resign. Syndrome came through quite a lot back in those days. Happily, with 90% membership, that's clearly not happening now. So our first conference was good fun, and I think there's a photograph of it down there. I didn't look at them all on the way through, so you can see the unlikely group. I think about 60 of us attended, which again was quite a good reflection of commitment at that time. Anyway, back to the rules. Now you call them something else. I'm not quite sure what you call them now. I wrote it down just so I remember it. Constitution, I should have been able to remember something like that. Probably a better term than rules. And they've been modified over the years, and I was having a look at them and trying to compare back to our original. The fundamental thrust is there, the thrust of looking after the membership, but making sure at the same time we looked after our health service and those people for whom we serve, our patient population. And I extracted from the current constitution rules a number of what I consider the key objectives. There are 14, I think, of them, and I wasn't going to come up with 14 because that would drive us all a bit silly reading through that lot. But I've come up, I think, with 4, which I just want to reflect upon a little bit further. The first was 4.3, that's to negotiate comprehensive and fair collective agreements between members and their employers, and that's really what it's all about if you're a union, and a bit of a given. But the ones we come more into reflecting the professional nature of our lives, to promote close professional and constructive working relationship with employers of members of the association, to develop a working relationship with employers, and to support the rights of all New Zealanders to equal access to comprehensive quality public health service, and to promote policies and engage in public debate on issues relating to the availability and delivery of the highest possible standards of publicly funded healthcare services for all New Zealanders. I mean, those are fundamentally very important objectives to have in a set of rules or constitution for a union. And it's really upon those 3 that I want to reflect further in my meander through 25 years. But to just get it out of the way, we have to mention negotiating, because that's what we do. The award booklet, again, many have followed. There seemed to be a yearly publication for a while. And in a way, we can say, without getting politically involved or industrially involved in what I'm saying, I'm not trying to intrude my thoughts too much, it ain't too bad where we've got to. There are tweaks and elements which need improvement, but it ain't too bad. We've negotiated salary scales. There's been interesting manipulations there. We were a national collective, then we went to regional, then we came national again. The scales were shortened, lengthened, the bottom put to the top, and all sorts of things done. But the scales ain't too bad. Annual leave was a hardy annual. We went from 3 weeks to 4 weeks through HOMAC, and now we're out to 6. Great gains. CME, again, we used to beg to be able to be allowed to go on conferences with funding. Now we have provisions as of right recognising the importance of CME to us as professionals, and that recognition extends to our employers. And the key one, which I really want to just dwell on a bit further, is something which started out as life as the work contract and ended up as job sizing, a concept you're all familiar with, but was totally alien back in the early 80s. My first record of the work contract then called was in 1982, where Winston McKean, who was then the medical superintendent, I think, in Hawke's Bay, wrote to me as the whole-timer representative outlining this concept of a work contract, which had a number of key provisions, just 3. One was equity, that there'd be equity between and amongst all employed, and when I say specialists, read into that dentists, medical officer, special scale, etc. And with what I call unders and overs around 40 hours, that the whole timer shouldn't stop at 40 hours and work endlessly there above, with something called the additional duty supplement at 10% if you work more than 44 hours. That the same concept that you could be 8/10 of 40, you can also be 12/10 of 40. So that the scale was endless and orientated around the nominal 40-hour salary. The next was recognition of time spent working whilst on call. Getting out of bed, coming into work, working long hours needed to be added to that working week. And the final one, which is probably the hardest of the lot, was recognition of time spent on call, now known as the availability allowance. Once that was nailed, and that was nailed I think in the early 90s as part of our collective, to me the rest was straightforward. We had fairness, palpable fairness in the way we were being remunerated for the hours we worked. Whether individually it was fairly carried through, whether the counting was correct, whether the managers approached it appropriately, and whether us as individuals actually approached the concept appropriately is subject to debate in certain quarters, but the basic concept is sound and holds. Time spent on call is tiring, it's confusing, it's fatigue generating, as has been my talk so far. The next one I want to touch on briefly is, and keep me on track, I'm losing track of time now. Okay, just throw something. It was the 412 to support the right of all New Zealanders to equal access to comprehensive quality, pressure on the word quality, public health services. And this is where time for quality came in. We moved away from just the back pocket, if you like, and looking at what I call some key considerations for improving the experience of New Zealanders within our health service. And it was great to me to see time for quality come through, and Jeff and the team, congratulations. It was 2008 from memory, but there's too many words to read them all. But it is basically recognising and... do I really want to read all the words? Not really. But the subtext, a quality improvement environment which supports openness, honesty, and the freedom to identify and admit mistakes or errors of judgment. Fundamental. And I'll just cover this off with a statement. For the last 7 years of my non-retired life, I was Medical Director Patient Safety for Canterbury. And this was a key element for advancing the agenda of quality and safety. The next is that understanding the nature of errors, that errors occur. Errors are part of life and are quite distinct from deliberate acts of harm, and that organisations need to recognise. And that's the second one, which again I've phrased, no place for punitive reactions to errors that are not the results of negligence. Phrasing I could argue with a little bit, but because what's negligence in the context, but there we go. And the employers and the employees are committed to fostering this environment, and to this end will work together to implement quality improvement initiatives, including credentialing. Quality was firmly on the agenda. It's included in our collective. It is an amazing thing to have in a collective, and I again applaud the ASMS for this progress. You might argue how well that's penetrating and how well that's been enacted, but the roots are there, and it's another tree which is growing and needs to be nurtured endlessly. Time for quality, great. The next was to promote close professional and constructive working relationships with employers of members of the association. Back in the early days, it was mostly the way you had conversations was not literal, but figurative. Bricks were thrown and a lot of invective was our approach to the employer and the member. However, in good hands, the next one, thank you very much, outlines how we should behave. Employee management partnership is founded on teamwork and respect, and this is something I totally agree with, and is something which was sadly lacking and shouldn't be sadly lacking. How can we provide a comprehensive health service if the people charged with running and delivering it are at loggerheads? It is a partnership, it is not a competition. Managers will support employees to provide leadership and service design, and I hear about clinical leadership and how that may be redesigned with the National Executive at the moment. The only thing I dislike in this slightly is it still implies them and us. The managers, are they the bosses who encourage the employees? It's still not quite the language, but it's a long way along the line. And again, affirming quality care drives the system to optimise patient outcomes, and the key, managers and employees will collaborate to meet both the patient test and the Whānau test, or when I throw in the granny test, which means the patient experience is optimised for the patient in a culturally appropriate way. These are powerful things, again, for a union to come up with, and must be nurtured. Yet another tree planted in 2009. And employees will support managers to operate services within the resources. So the resource word does come into it. I'll try and stay away from talking about money too much, but we have to work within the funds as available, in good hands. My take on clinical leadership, which I was just going to write it down off the top of my head, was that we should be regarding our managers as colleagues working in partnership, reflected in the previous presentation. Recognise that we have shared stewardship. We are equally responsible for managing the coin. It's not them and us. We have equal responsibility. Delivery of healthcare is a multi-team sport, and there's a tendency, although we talk clinical leadership, to think doctors, nurses, physios, pharmacists, everybody works together. No one has ascendancy, no one's in charge. We work collectively to deliver health services. Don't denigrate. It's easy to throw the bricks, it's nice to mutter, but we should never denigrate. And appreciative inquiry, work off what we're doing well. It's very easy to get lost in the misery of what's not happening, rather than actually recognising we have a superb health system. We have a superb structure in the ASMS. How can we lever off the positives and not dwell, as we sometimes do, because that's human nature, on the negatives? There's a wee bit of that around. It's overcome somewhat by the other important ingredient in the 25 years, and that's the consultation committees that have been set up. up and down the country, both at the DHB level, the JCCs, which meet on a regular basis to discuss issues pertinent to the DHB, and head off at the impasses between battleships and lighthouses, but also the National Joint Consultation Committee. And I took the opportunity to read through some of the information on the website regarding this, and great progress is being made, positive relationships are developed. When you're eyeballing people and talking about a common good, it's a bit hard to end up in negative. It won't always run smoothly, I'm sure, but it's a big step forward that we're meeting and discussing outside of the award rounds, which inevitably end up with some degree of negativity. I do offer you a challenge, though, because we're consulting all over the show, up and down, with our employees and maybe our membership. But where's the consumer? I just throw it out as a thought. How about a consumer on the next executive to guide the way? Just a thought. And then the ultimate, which came through last year, Toimata Haora. I'm using the translation as provided by Jeff in his paper, Peak Expertise and Vision for Health. It's something we really missed out on in the early days, recognising biculturalism and embracing the treaty. And I suppose we're a wee bit South Island, Christchurch, white-minded in our setup. I'm pleased that it's passed, and it's a great step forward. And again, thank you to the intervening teams over the years to bring us into what is the modern day of many years ago. This was one of my natural pause pointers. If I was taking too long, I could shuffle off and look like I'd said enough, or you get punished with a little bit more. So, punished with a bit more. Okay. I'm changing direction a little bit, and this is possibly injecting a little bit my own thought processes rather than 25 years, but here goes. I went through the objectives, and many of them I've spoken about, and we've met, if you like, the requirements in terms of the changes we've injected into our functioning as an ASMS. But they all bring us back to the dollar. None of this happens without a dollar. None of this happens without funding. And I'm aware of the recent press releases, and this is in no way reflects, and nor do I wish to discuss those. I developed this talk well before that happened. One of the good things, I think the manager before the manager before the manager before last in Christchurch Hospital, they tend to die quite quickly. It's a deathbed for general managers. He gave all of us in the senior exec team this little plastic thing which you can hang on your name badge. Health dollar, single use only. Improve patient care and clinical services overall. Spend it once, spend it wisely. And I think we need to bear in mind that there is only one spend for each health dollar, and no matter how much we get in the way of the health dollar from Vote Health, you can only spend each one of them once, and we must spend them wisely. And it behoves all of us in our joint stewardship to do so. So how do we get the best use of the health dollar? And just a few reflections. The first is the concept of the triple aim, and I'm not sure whether any of you have read this bit on the Health Quality Safety Commission website, but the triple aim is really trying to link through the improved quality and safety experience of healthcare for the individual, the improved health of a community, and also getting best value for the health resource in a collective concept. So we can't all just give it to the individual. You have to think about the benefit of the community, which may in fact mean an individual doesn't quite get the bang for the buck, but you've only got so many bucks, so how do you get the best value for them? And I'm possibly not the right person to talk with the triple aim, and Dave Galler might be a better person because he's on the commission. But one is just to drive out waste. We cannot afford to waste a single dollar, and we waste them all over the show. We don't even know we're wasting them. But every time you pick up something, you say, I don't want that one, and throw it away and pick up another one because it suits you better, be it the suture, be it the swab, be it the syringe, be it the needle, be it a misplaced script. We're wasting dollars. Within the waste, and I'm reflecting on dollars mostly, the other is the loss of goodwill, and this is the thing that worried me most in the past, and it looks like we're improving, is that if you've got an engaged workforce, a workforce that's aligned, you get far more productivity for your dollar without even flogging people along. Enthusiasm takes you a long way, commitment takes you a long way, and we are all obliged to drive out waste. My key theme is that of safety with my previous role in Canterbury. The last year's HQSC pronouncement had 489 folk harmed by virtue of being under our care. Not because of the disease, but because they came into our hospitals, they were harmed. And that harm included death. I still have memories of an email I received from a man who said, "You killed my wife." Not me, but us. And he was right, we did. And this is unacceptable, and we have a total responsibility to drive out harm, to address the question of safety, and it goes beyond just time for quality. In a pragmatic sense, every time we harm someone, we put in another 7 days under hospital care. Those costs go, and someone else doesn't get that bed. It's an expensive pastime. And the other is that healthcare is a continuum between primary, secondary and tertiary, that we should see the patient journey as the primary objective, not the fact that we work in hospitals, we want money for hospitals, and them in GP land, well, they just take it away from us, which tend to be some of the rhetoric in the past. And again, it was great to see this joint agreement between the ASMS and Independent Practitioners Association, which recognises that. And again, another important concept for the ASMS, because we do sometimes get lost in our buildings. A wellness model where the patient is managed as close to the home as possible has to be our goal. A hospital admission should be seen almost as a failure unless it's for something which is truly tertiary, secondary in requirement. You shouldn't be there because there's nowhere else to care for you, or we didn't care for you appropriately in the community. And we must remember that they are patient care dollars, not hospital dollars, not GP dollars, not nurse dollars, they're patient dollars. And getting close to the end, the other is taking objective 4.1, which is to promote policies and engage in public debate on issues relating to availability and delivery of the highest possible standards of publicly funded healthcare. At the moment, we actually don't know what we're supposed to be delivering. We deliver blind. And this comes back to the concept of the core services drive in 1992. Sharon Crosby, people may recall, headed up a committee looking at core services set out to determine and define what New Zealand public might expect from their public health system. It fell over for a number of reasons. One, it's too damn hard, and I suspect it was politically non-palatable. But at the moment, we spend dollars not really knowing what we're supposed to be spending them on. If I, as an intensivist, I can spend endless dollars on a given patient. The vascular surgeon can spend endless dollars. Politics drives the decisions of how much cardiac surgery takes place, possibly. Politics drives decisions around cancer therapy. It's not a comprehensive review of what we need. The move towards recognising the needs of the youth, the children of New Zealand, is a great move, but we do need, I believe, to have a national conversation about the core services again. So I'll leave you with what I see might be a few challenges for the future. I'm not really supposed to talk about the future. The past is all I can remember. The happy thing about the future is, one, I won't remember. Two, I'm not part of the future in terms of delivery of healthcare, but I am part of the future of recipient of healthcare, now being a proud gold card owner. I also want to just reflect for a moment that when we design for the future, we actually, and as Hein stated so well, we're not designing for us, we're designing for future generations. And sometimes the greybeards are not necessarily the right people to make all those decisions. And it's great to see Michael, who's going to speak later today, reflect from his perspective of what the future should look like, because we're designing in terms of healthcare deliverers, the professionals, their future, and in terms of the patients, a different future. However, I still don't see, I'm not allowed to chuck out a couple of challenges, but they're nothing great. And the first is to beef up the commitment to patient safety. When I gave my president's address to the NZMA in 2008, I think it was, I stressed patient safety, and I challenged the NZMA to make a palpable commitment to patient safety. When I reflect, it was there, but it wasn't what I was anticipating and hoping for. I think it needs to be beefed up, and I'm not sure what links we have with the Health Quality Safety Commission, but positive links would be of value in this regard. Again, consumer representative on the national executive or somewhere in the system, we talk about what we're going to do for the folk. We don't know what the folk actually want. We need to find out. And I've found that having consumers on the different groups I've been involved with brings a lot of aha moments to life, which you just wouldn't have had otherwise. And the final one is really, how about stimulating the discussions on core services again? You ain't got much to do, really. It'll keep you occupied for a wee while yet. And with that, I'll leave you with what is my favourite slide, my favourite motto, the language you might consider a bit yesterday in some regards, and I'd extend hospital into whole of health service, but it's well worth remembering that the patient is our purpose, and we're not doing a favour by serving him, he's doing us a favour by giving us the opportunity to do so. I wish you all very well for the next 25. I won't be around to see it. Well, if I am, it's bloody bad luck for everyone. And with that, I think I will close. Thank you.